So we have to start with this, right? Motion of the base. Perfect calmness prevailed before creation came into action. Even power or force lay frozen at its origin. The time for the change, however, came. The time for the change, however, came. Motion got awakened and set things into action, resulting in the formation of forms and shapes in accordance with the will of the nature. At the root of all this, there was something which we might call as active force, but that too must have a base for itself, without which it cannot have its action. And it was the ultimate. Thus, we come to the conclusion that creation was a result of motion, and the motion was that of the base. Should we move?
Yeah, we'll move ahead next.
Divine grace. In answer to your question as to whether divine grace is the same creative force which brought the universe into being, or something of a lower order, or whether it is something like ether or any other like thing, I may say that if it is exclusively the creative force, how shall one account for the dissolution? Is there some other force for that? In this way, are there two forces at work? I do not think so. If, however, we take it to be only the creative force, as you say, we must then go on growing and increasing every moment. What will be the result in that case? We shall all along be in diversity, and the very idea of unity will be quite out of our view. I fail to understand what difficulty faces you if you take it to be something of highest value and greatly advantageous to you for your ultimate purpose. If it is definite that everyone gets a share of it in proportion to their capacity and worth. I'll move ahead.
Yeah.
There is Trinity in everything, even in the minutest particle. Every nucleus has all these three. Every nucleus has all these three attributes in it, which resemble the functions of Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh. That is, one has the power of creation in it, the other the power of growth and development, and the third the power of destruction. There is proper adjustment in the functions of each. One can thereby trace out the effects of these by examining the actions and counteractions of each.
They're all straightforward. It's more of philosophy. Yeah.
The reality is not a thing to be perceived through physical organs or senses that can only be realized in the innermost core of the heart.
If nobody is asking any questions, we'll give some time and then go ahead reading.
Okay. Idea of God. As a rule, the very idea of God brings with it the concept of highest potentiality. and we hold by it in order to develop the same potentiality within us. This is no doubt quite natural and at the same time essential too. The difference also is brought to our understanding by methods of comparison and contrast. We can never rise above self unless we take into view something greater and more powerful, which indirectly becomes the focus of our attention. Yeah. So if a seeker on the path of spirituality wipes off the idea of highest potency of God, he shall never be, just a second, able to push himself towards it. So it becomes essential to have that view, but only for such time till he becomes conscious of what there may be at its root. The base wherefrom the power starts has no activity at all. Has there been activity there? The things coming out would have been in a shattered state, and creation as we have it today would never have been into being. If one peeps into the absolute state of God, having these facts in view, he will find that a supraactive center quite akin to zero-ness, um, he will find that he will find there a supraactive center quite akin to zero-ness. A man may be strongest if he is a co-sharer of the forceless force, which is there at the origin. The supraactive center of every activity is always inactive. This is the axiom of nature and is applicable to in all spheres. Our real nature, manas or mind, which is the vital force in man, has been vaguely represented in many different ways, but that it controls all thoughts, emotions, and impulses is commonly accepted by all. It is generally treated as adversely opposed to the true nature of the being because of its unrestrained diversion, mostly towards evil. But that is not due to its real character, but to the effect of wrong training. As matter of fact, the mind or manas in its regulated regulated and balanced state is the only instrument that can solve the problems of existence. So regulated mind and balanced state is the only instrument that can solve the problem of existence.
The thing is, the mind is there. The mind has come from God, but due to the passage of time, due to wrong training, certain grossness got incorporated into the mind, as a result of which man acts and behaves contrary to the nature, or he does bad actions which will create suffering, actually suffering to himself and suffering to others and nature around him. In yoga training, what we are doing is we're cleaning all those impurities and we are eliminating all the wrong ways of thinking. And like suppose if we our attitudes, we develop attitudes in our mind which are in correspond with 10 commandments, that means it has come to a balanced state. So, and that balanced mind is capable of solving the problem of existence. It will make you know your true nature, which is nothing but divine in or which is divinity itself, actually. So our meditation, cleaning, bedtime prayer, 9 p.m. prayer, all these things help us to remove the wrong types of thinking in our mind or the impurities in our mind. That is what is important. Okay, we'll go ahead then.
Yeah. Different views have been put, origins of manas, different views have been put forth regarding the origin of manas. Its subtlest existence can be traced as far back as the time of creation, when it appeared in its absolute state in the form of stir or stimulus. In that primal state, it was closely akin to the root force, which worked for bringing the creation into being. I have cleared this point in the efficacy of Raj Yoga, second edition footnote on page 2. The theory related to the origin of human mind as expounded in this book stands on quite rational grounds. The primary steel brought into action by the dormant will of God led to the cause of existence. The steel set into motion the latent powers, and the process of creation and animation started in every being in the form of the chief active force. In man, it came to be known as the mind, at the root of which there is the same dormant will, just as it was just as it was the steel. Thus, the human mind is closely identical with the root force or the original steel, which it is part of. As such, the function of both are also closely similar. Someone, was there anything?
It is a foundation of Babuji's thinking of yoga and all that. So this should be clear in our mind. That is why yoga is also possible because we are continuously connected with the same force, and presently there are grossness and impurities. If they're removed, you can unite yourself with your original nature. So this point is a foundation why we get motivation and why we get confidence that we can succeed in regulating our mind and becoming a master of our own mind, because we are part of that purity, and we practice so that you realize that purity in our own being actually. So suppose if you have a religious notion that God is in some heaven and is different from me, yoga is not possible. Yoga is possible between two similar things. So your mind and God's mind are of a similar nature. So that is why union is possible. So this is a fundamental axiom in our system.
So when you say mind and then Atman, right? Are they two different things?
These are the languages we use. Mind is what you and have experienced every day. Soul or Atman, we are using a word, but we don't know what it is. But the thing is, suppose you regulate your mind, you meditate your mind, you purify your mind. What happens? There is there's a knowledge unfolds in your mind, and that knowledge gives you access to a condition of happiness which is infinite and which is blissful in nature. That and which has got its own existence, where even if the mind is not working, that cannot be taken away. So that state of bliss, which is of a permanent nature, which is of an eternal nature, they use the words soul or Atman for that thing actually. So you get the access, or you know about the soul only when your mind is an instrument of the soul actually. Soul is your being actually, and the mind is an instrument. That's the thing. Practically, you can think like that.
Sir, in case when the soul leaves the body, the manas continues to move out. Whenever new body is taken, maybe the same manas will go. There is no change in that, must be, sir.
So there is a concept called jiva. Jiva is different from soul. Jiva is the chitta in which all the samskaras and mind will be there.
Right.
But in spiritual journey, when ego is gone, right, then jiva has got no basis. There is no basis for the mind to exist.
Okay.
So you transcended the mind. Mind is a combination of. It's a matter in Indian psychology. Mind is a matter which is composed of sattva, raja, and tamoguna. So Atma is transcendent to that actually. It is beyond that. So once you realized Atman, and then the mind simply collapses. It doesn't exist.
Right.
It disintegrates. But you will be there. It's just like a Godavari river or Krishna river. When it merges into the ocean, it becomes the ocean.
You meant here the divine. You meant divine here.
Which one?
Here, when you say you remain, you meant divine remains.
There's only one consciousness, no? Consciousness cannot be divided. Like space, you cannot divide it. Like suppose the earthen pot is there. Air is there in that. But surrounding the earthen pot, air is also there. So suppose the pot is broken, there is no separation between the air inside and outside. So there is only one substance which is reality, and that is consciousness or God or chitta. So the feeling that you are separate from God is because of ego actually. So when that is gone, then you become one with the infinite actually. So there is only, finally speaking, most philosophers come round to the point of Shankara's Advaita only. The truth is that there is only one force existing actually.
Here the pot is
related discussed. Earlier, Babuji discusses about identity. He says till the time of Mahapraya, there will be a minor difference between the soul and the center or God. He talks about it. But these are all philosophies which should not bother. We should think. We should think that we have got a life which is very precious, and we are grateful for having a mind and body which is functioning, and use our mind to achieve liberation or to achieve freedom from suffering actually. So once that is there, all questions drop off, because from that location you cannot put a question. That question is possible only when you are entrapped in a body and intellect is there. When you realize all these questions don't exist actually.
Right. Thank you.
So this is only for intellectual thing, but Babuji's system, yoga, we want to practically feel what it is, what do you mean by God, or what do you mean by soul? We want to actually know in our bones, in our heart, what it means, what is the meaning of that word. We want to feel what it is. So yoga helps us to feel. Once you feel, all these questions simply don't exist there.
Right.
So we are you see, we are entered into the path of yoga. Before yoga, we have read Upanishad, Bhagavad Gita and all that. That's all theory. So to experience that theory only, we take to yoga. Yoga is an attempt to feel what we have read, and in all the spiritual literature, we have read so many things about mind, Atman, Brahman, all those things. But all that thing can be only felt practically when you enter into yoga and start practicing yoga under a guidance of a guru who is himself realized.
Right.
So from our location, we cannot think about what will be the nature of center, what is star, and what all the show. You can form an idea, but it will be more of an imagination than actual experience. Actually, yoga asks you to actually experience what is being told. Actually, and that experience comes by practice and purifying your mind. When I say purifying the mind, that means there should be harmony between your thinking, talking, and behavior. Everything should be, you should be following truth, like Yama, truthfulness. You have to follow. All those things will come into it. You should have compassion. You should have generosity. You should have, forgiveness. All these divine qualities are there. Then you can know that your mind is pure. Unless you develop that purity, you will not have an experience of God or soul or nature of soul and all that. So we practice yoga to develop this yama, niyama, and all these things. Vairagya. Vairagya is a state of mind where your mind is not disturbed by the desires. Your mind has got a supremacy over the thoughts. If a person doesn't have vairagya, whatever thought waves come in your mind, your mind, and along with the mind, your soul also will be dragged in that direction. So you get attracted to sensual pleasures and all. That is a state of a mind of general ordinary people who are slaves of wishes. Whereas in vairagya, you're no more a slave of wishes. You have a supremacy over the wishes which keep cropping up in your mind. So a mind also exists only to execute your desires. In Vairagya, there are no desires. If there are no desires, there is no role for mind. That's what Babuji, when in the 1973 message, he says, the senses senses are dismissed from service. That means there is no work for the senses or mind because there are no desires. Then you become a universal being. Then you know that there's no difference between your consciousness and God consciousness. And the famous Mahavakya Upanishads, Tattvamasi, it becomes an experience to you. It's no more a mere word, actually. So we should focus on what Babuji is telling. When he's writing these things, it should give us confidence that our mind is of the same nature as Babuji's mind or God's mind. And then if we try to remove the impurities from the mind or wrong cognition from the mind, then you achieve yoga or oneness, or it's called Layavastha. Layavastha means you merge in that your original nature, divine nature. So that thing you should keep it in mind.
Thanks.
So however much you understand about this, you should be happy about it. If you want more, you have to meditate, and then you'll be able to understand. Whatever is written, you can actually experience it. If you contemplate and go into meditation, you'll be able to understand. You'll feel what Babuji has written actually.
Right.
Okay, Borkar padho.
Yeah. The manas or mind is thus a component factor in bringing the universe to its present material form. And a shobh or stir, which falls immediately next to the absolute, is the mind or manas, the purpose of which, as put forth in religion, was creation. The idea of creation was incorporated with it. But as a rule, the two opposites always go together combined. The processes of evolution and involution work simultaneously. Where there is generative growth, the disruptive action of the reverse tendencies lie dormant within. Naturally, it resulted into two types of force. The one which brings things into existence, is the positive force, and the other is the negative force. If we want to secure our return to the origin after dissolving our existence, we have necessarily to make ourselves negative. This is the only process for that.
So idea is telling is you have to develop vairagya. Vairagya is a state of mind where there are no desires in your mind. Then only you can return to your base. If desires are there, desires are only outside of you. So you have to move outside to fulfill your desires. Unless the desire is about reaching God, which is, which is helpful for yoga. Okay, next page.
It is wonderful to find that everything in nature is round so as to form a circuit for the flow of power. The positive force revolves alongside the negative in order to effect generative growth through the medium of heat caused by the action, in accordance with the divine will. The process of creation took about 120,000 years, as revealed to me in a state of superconsciousness. The creation thus came into being, and the heat caused by motion became the base for the formation of forms and shapes. It exists in us too and is the basis of the whole structure. If somehow we bring this heat to a state of moderation, it becomes almost identical with the original current. The idea of rousing up the internal fire which has brought us to be present level of consciousness as put forth by certain religious teachers is a wrong interpretation. What does he mean by rousing?
See, the other religions have told that the divine or the activity, so whenever mind is active, whenever we have a desire, you want to enjoy certain experience, the mind is very active. It creates thoughts and actions to fulfill the desires. Even desires of survival and reproduction also come into it actually. So they are necessary for survival of human organism and perpetuation of the human species. But along with that, human being is attracted to enjoy so many other experiences and pleasures basically. So whenever mind is indulging in these activities, that results in a sort of a fire or a heat in your whole system actually. So, yoga is actually self-dissolution. We don't want this heat to exist. So there is a metaphor which Shankaracharya talks in Viveka Chudamani. He talks the mind as if it is a yajna and like fire kundalini, and then you put ghee in that and the fire keeps on burning. And this is the five priests who are nothing but these five sense organs who bring in the material like ghee and pour it in so that the fire keeps burning. So as long as the fire keeps burning, you will have no knowledge about the base or the center in you, which is your real nature. So this activity of the mind will not allow you to have a glimpse about the divine nature which is lurking in your heart actually. So the other people, other religions, Babuji claims that other people talk about activating that fire actually. But he says that is not the correct way. You have to cool down that fire. That means you have to reduce your unnecessary activities, reduce your desires, reduce your keep on reducing your activity. That's what he talks in 4th commandment. Then the fire will become normal. And then when the fire becomes normal, the mind becomes quiet. The mind, the activity in the mind, chittavritti nirodha happens. Then only realization happens. That is why in the system of training, the trainer also is recommended to give suggestion that coolness is developing when the yatra is taking place in the second knot. We are advised to give this suggestion that coolness is developing. That means the mind cools down. And when it cools down, the chittavritti nirodha happens, and then you're moving towards the realization. That is the correct thing, actually. So that's what Babuji is saying, that the view held by certain religious people that you have to invoke the idea that fire of divine should be started in your system to realize God and all that. He feels it is wrong. He feels that you should cool down that fire and all that. So that is the idea, actually.
Okay. So should I move ahead?
This is an important point most people don't know. Yogi, that's why will try to do activities which are minimally required for leading this life. He will not unnecessarily, indulge in activities which are superfluous to the duties which he is supposed to do. Like whole world is suffering now because of consumerism, materialism. People want to work hard so that they can earn more money, so that they can have more pleasurable experiences. All that is happening because it is contrary or movement away from God to a large extent. Majority of the humanity is moving in that direction. That's why peace is also not possible. When you're moving away from God, suffering and pain exponentially increases, actually. Only when you meditate and allow your mind to settle in your real home, which is the divinity, then only the pain and suffering comes down. Then only you'll feel peaceful. But after a certain time, humanity has to come back to the involution. That means evolution and involution. He will come back to God, actually, because too much movement away from God causes too much of suffering, which will become unbearable after some time. So after some suffering, he'll start thinking of freedom from that suffering. Then he'll come to yoga and meditation. Okay, we'll carry on this.
Yeah. The origin of, so as a matter of fact, the heat or fire is to be cooled down so that its creative effect may be removed. The origin of time can also be traced as far back as the point where from the creation came into being. The period covered by Shobha to come into action is time. It is absolute state. In its absolute state, it is a power. In its absolute state, it is a power which can be utilized by yogis of caliber. It is not that the sages of yore knew nothing about it. They never gave it out as such, although they did utilize it on occasions for constructive purposes. It is a very high attainment. One who achieves it also secures conquest over space, the supramental or the supermind, so much talked about by Sri Aurobindo, is as a matter of fact always present on earth when the divine force in the form of special personality is in existence. Really, it is not that supramental which is required for the thorough It is not the supramental which is required for the thorough change of the character of the world, but a stronger force, the supramental, as one might call it, which is a subtlest and hence the most powerful. It is a highly potentialized force which is far above the qualities of Sattva, Raja, and Tama. Higher above, there is a still greater force which only a yogi of caliber who comes for the special work of nature can utilize. In my opinion, unless a person is able to utilize the divine powers, he has not even peeped into divinity. The current which descended for bringing the creation into being was in its absolute state. Our individual mind has been the lowest end of it. Now, if we are able to develop synonymity between both the ends, we reach a state beyond which there is but absolute. I had once tried that with greatest caution, of course, for experience's sake, upon one of the highly advanced associates for only about half a minute, and also only to the extent that the vrittis of his lower mind were impelled towards the original source. The result was that the effect weighed so heavily upon his heart that I could with great difficulty regulate it in about a month and a half. The current which descended in the being of man had traveled through space on account of its propensity and went on changing because it had come down effecting actions. It found a center as every action normally does. This center is known as the Chitta Lake. It came down creating everything necessary for its purpose. Thus the causes that help the process of creation began to gather. Chitta Lake is a place where everything remains inclined downwards and no tendency to rise upwards unless his own or the master's powers becomes instrumental. In this respect, when that is got over, it resumes an upward tendency. Now the thing which had entered into our being created dim vibrations, causing a gentle force which descended into the Vishuddhi Chakra through the particles. This chakra, often known by diverse names, is the meeting place of the Pinda, microcosm, and the Brahmanda, macrocosm. So Pinda and the Brahmanda regions and is the seat of Maya. Immense power is located there. Man gets into dreams when his thought comes in touch with this region. The center of fire lies close by. The Deepak Raga, one of the 6 kinds of the old classical ragas, which when sung sets the dead candle ablaze, is chanted from this point. When it comes down into the heart, from this point, it brings with it the state of Maya, but the condition lying ahead is also present in it in a dormant state. It now divides into 3 branches. The middle one proceeds a little downward and forms into a sort of knot at the place where point A is located. The other two go towards the right and the left. On the left, it enters into the longer region of the heart. If miracle working capacity is to be developed, one may get himself attached with the part of the current which is saturated with the Mayavi condition. I may, however, reveal that mere meditation can develop miracles provided it is devoid of the thought of the divine or of divine attainment. This is only a hint which I do not mean to clarify further. The Bhagavad Purana too gives methods for developing miracles by the process of meditation, but it concludes with the words of Lord Vishnu stating, "Those who want to have me through devotion get me as well as miracles." And this is a bad fact. I do not take up the topic how fire, air, and other elements came into being, since it has been sufficiently dealt with in the scriptures. Now, if we try to force our passage upwards through the medium of the current which has brought us down, it will be very hard job for the passage. Just a second.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is a bad fact. I do not take up the topic how fire and other elements came into being, since it has been sufficiently dealt with in the scriptures. Now, if we try to force our passage upwards to the medium of the current which has brought us down, it will be very hard job for the basic. We therefore take up a different course. Crossing the Vishuddhi Chakra sphere, our path is straightened since we get filled up with power and the process of divinization commences. By divinization, I mean that all senses and faculties are harmonized, assuming their original state, and are merged in the real. The final state of divinization comes when every atom of the body becomes one with the real state, the ultimate.
We'll stop here.
Yeah.
This is meant for meditation and contemplation. So we'll meet next Sunday. There are no
Yeah.
questions here.